Welcome back to the Breaking Into Athletic Performance podcast. We are going to start our part 2 of our interview with Kosta here. So he's going to go ahead and dive into the topic of your ego. So go ahead, sir.
Oh, yes. So the ego, in this field, I think you need an ego to sustain yourself and to even present yourself as a coach too, because you got to know what you're talking about. But I think one of the biggest flaws of strength coaches is we have too much ego sometimes. You have certain coach running X program that's revolutionary, and that's just not the case. Because if you just keep programming very simple, you could actually have a higher effect, like we talked about in part 1, with more general is more specific, But if you miss one day of that super complex programming, or maybe 2 or 3 days in a training cycle because, your head coach or whoever you had, ran the team to death, well, now your whole macro cycle or meso cycle is ruined. So you got to figure out which place you want to land on and what matters to you. Also listen to your athletes, because if you have an ego, a lot of them will look up to you because they've never had a strong coach or figure in their life. But also if you have too much ego and you want to crack the whip too much, like a great example would be being a football, like cliche Power 5 football strength coach with women's soccer. Probably not the best scenario, stereotypically speaking. So you got to know your audience too and know how to present that ego to them. So you got to have both. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this as young coaches from, your time interning and even then Ryan's time being a GA right now.
Ryan, you can start.
Yeah, so I totally agree. I think you need to have almost like a volume button on your ego is kind of the way I like to think of it. Like if you're getting interviewed, just like you said, you need to be uber confident in your thought processes and your ways of doing things and in your ability to do the job. Even meeting with a sport coach, like when you go into it, you probably don't want your ego turned all the way up to 10. But if they want to do some crap at practice that's like dangerous and they could literally run a kid into a heat stroke, like you're the authority figure in that matter because you're trained and educated and certified in the ability to judge a safe conditioning session. But at the same time, like when you're meeting with the sport coach, you might need to turn that volume knob down because it's their team. You need to conform to their offensive or defensive system. You need to fit the needs of their athletes based on the genetics that they recruit, the play style they're looking for, the physical attributes that they need to see improve. That's all ultimately up to them. And you need to figure out how to meet the needs of those coaches and those athletes. So there's times for an ego. As a young coach, like I've had a lot of situations where my volume button is turned up way too high. And I got like offended when a coach told me they wanted me to not do a certain exercise or to pull back the volume in the weight room and stuff like that. And there's no need for that. Like they might not be educated, but at the same time, like they're probably right because they know exactly what's going on at practice. They know how they look when they get there. And I don't need my ego through the roof getting offended from that. But there's been other times where, I should have stood my ground and I didn't. I try to get on an athlete for coming in late. They just ignore me and I let it go. Guess what? They came in late again and other people come in late. So it's definitely something you need to figure out based on the context of every situation you're in. And I think the more practice you get kind of navigating difficult conversations or navigating interviews and stuff like that, you're going to be able to pick and choose when to turn that volume knob up or down on that ego.
Yeah, I definitely like the analogy of a volume knob. So I'm going to give a couple specific examples for context. So when I was doing my GA, for some reason, I felt like I had my volume knob turned up perfectly all the time. It was always at like a 6.5, 7. And that's where I needed it there because the head coach, Vic Brown, amazing guy. He gave us just enough freedom that we could do some stuff we wanted, but he would always dial us back if he needed to. One example where I completely screwed up and couldn't understand why, I was doing an interview, and it was down to myself and one other person. And I was in that interview, and the head guy who was interviewing me, it was a day-long thing in person, basically hinted to me that he wanted to hire me, and then my ego went right to 10. And for the rest of the day, I don't think I was cocky, but I was very confident that I was going to get that job. And then a couple weeks later, he called me up and said, I really wanted to hire you, but everyone else here that you talked with said that you were too confident. And I was like, what? I've never even heard that before in my life in an interview. But like you said, know your audience, because at that place I was interviewing, they weren't looking for someone who was very confident. I mean, they were looking for someone who was confident. They were not looking for someone who was overconfident in themselves. They wanted someone who's going to come in and mold themselves into their system. And it didn't seem to them like I was able to do that. So you got to know when to turn it down, of course. Another experience I have is that when working with my athletes recently, I find that I also have my volume turned up a little too high. Sometimes they can't get in and let me know when something's wrong. And that's also stemmed from, I've worked with a couple teams somewhat recently that had relatively poor cultures. So I didn't really want to hear anything they had to say because they didn't work very hard. So I was pretty much saying, fuck you, which is the exact opposite of what I should have been doing.
Yeah.
And the only time I really turn my ego down too much is when I'm with sport coaches, which I feel like a lot of people have a very opposite experiences at, but it is their team. And at the end of the day, we are support staff. So I often do turn mine down a little too low and let them get away with not way more than I should, but a little bit more than I should. And that's one thing I personally need to work on is turning it up on the sport coaches and saying, absolutely not. We are not doing a circuit workout every day. So that's my take on it. The volume analogy is awesome. I don't know if you guys have specific experiences you want to share as well, but those are the ones that resonate with me.
I really like the example of where one of you guys gave an analogy of, okay, like someone came late and then guess what? I didn't say anything and they came late again and again. And then eventually you have to punish the whole team. And they look at you like, well, she came late or he came late. Why can't I come late? Everything dials back into your culture, which I think is where the ego can be beneficial. You know, I made sure from day one when I was with men's cheer at the University of Miami, you know, one, tell them, hey, be here on time. And if you're late, you know, like you're late. If I say be here at 6 a.m., we're here at 5:55 in the morning. And I would make the culture point, you're 5 minutes early or you're late. And it's very simple. And I made sure everyone understood that in our meeting before they came in. And guess what? First day, guy came in right at 6 a.m. We all had agreed these are the tiers of quote unquote punishment if you're late. And I don't like that term punishment. I think that it's, you know, if we all agree on it, it's a standard. You came in and you didn't hold up the standard. You know, there's a reason why that U was on your chest. Now represent it well. So we never had anyone come in late after that. But I think that was a scenario where things went really well. But then with some other teams and maybe some coaches didn't, you know, have the backbone to even talk to their star player who they really need to play against this big time team this, you know, Friday or Saturday, you know, then that spills over into the weight room. And then I can't do anything about it. And then you're kind of subject to that coach where maybe you should turn that volume up a little more. But then wait, you don't want to lose your job, so you choose to dial it back and play the long game. But I think also kind of adding on to that too, it's our responsibility as strength and conditioning coaches to provide, this is a very unique term, I would say healthy brainwashing in a sense to coaches, because I know a lot of the time they want to do, like you mentioned, a circuit workout. Well, why are we doing a circuit workout in a strength phase that's going to jack up their heart rate and have no CNS drive to get their numbers up and cause that adaptation to happen? So it's up to us to slowly figure out how we can get that coach's buy-in to us as well as we go into their program. So it goes both ways at the end of the day. But, you know, the volume analogy works great, but you'll learn. And I think as young coaches, you will fail. You are not perfect. I promise you, if you're a young coach, listen to this, you will fail. You will screw up. You've heard it from all three of us on the podcast right now. It's okay. Learn from it. Nobody's perfect. Because I think I would always go to these conferences and see these amazing coaches and see their ego come out. And it was in a good way. But the coaches who admitted they failed, I resonated more with. And I felt more comfortable talking to. Because if I went to go talk to X big time coach at X pro team or school or university, I always felt intimidated. Like, oh, I'm not good enough to talk to him. But then suddenly you realize we're all human. They're just not showing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Going back to the culture thing, we probably talked about it when we had Chase on, Ryan, but basically what you laid out for us at the U was setting your values and holding them accountable. And I think those are the two most important things you can do when you're coming into a new job is set your standards, expectations, values, all that stuff, and then have very specific consequences, and then just hold them to that standard that you set. I think there's nothing more important that you can do, and hopefully your sport coaches are on board with that. And I mean, I know I've talked about it before. One thing I always do is I type that stuff up and I say, you guys add anything you want, and then we'll talk about it. We'll talk about subtracting anything you want to this. And then if we all agree, we're all going to sign our name to this. So all I have to do if someone comes in late is just walk out this paper and point consequence. And that's all I got to do. And if they're not going to abide, 9 times out of 10, the team who also signed the sheet is going to hold them to that standard for you, and you don't even have to do it. So that's something I really like to get into. If you have any specific things you like to do with your culture, I know it's a little different for you in the tactical setting, but we'd love to hear some stuff about culture from you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Diving into that is a really unique one because my guys are not forced to come to me. It is a complete voluntary program. Now, we've been fortunate to have a great culture here at Langley already from the get-go, where the commanders, directors of operations, guys on, Air Combat Command, like we have Air Combat Command on this base, which is like one of the pinnacle bases to be at if you have, some kind of command center there. So these are the guys that wanted the contract in the first place that I'm on. Now, is there pilots that have pushback? Yes. I mean, that's just the nature. You're not going to please everyone. It's that whole analogy of the bell curve, right? 20% of the people you're never going to win over. Don't even try. The middle 60 is right there. And then 20% of the people are going to love you no matter what. So if you can get as many of those people from that 60% to sway them your way, now the culture starts shifting. Now it's like, okay, yeah, we need to get in to see Coach T. I'm hurting from these G-forces tugging at my neck with this helmet. My low back got compressed during when I pulled 9 Gs this weekend. And when you talk to them and understand their culture and just go, sit down and have a coffee, a conversation, get lunch with the guys. I realize college athletes, you can't do that because of NCAA rules, but that goes a long way for them. And I'll even swing by their offices sometimes. I'm only, 500 yards or so from the squad house. So why don't I go into these squad houses, pop in and say, hey man, haven't seen you in a while. I'm just here in the building meeting so-and-so. Like, how are you? Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I got you. I'll come see you. And I actually have a list in my performance center. Who haven't I seen in the past 2 weeks? If I haven't seen you, you're not on the attendance sheet and you're normally here, I put you on the list and I follow up with you. Small little things. I'm not dealing with 18 to 22, 23-year-old college athletes or younger people that are slightly older than that. I'm dealing with guys that are, roughly 25 to 45 years old. So you have that big range. So understand, is this guy from a different generation? How should I address him? What rank is he, like we talked about earlier? That's what plays a big part of it. Or who could I go to help kind of nudge him a little bit? I don't think that, because we all have that one person that we're never going to listen to no matter what, because we just don't like them, But if I had my best friend, his name's Landon, come and talk to me, well, I'll listen to him. Absolutely. Because I have a better rapport built with him. So sometimes going to maybe their commander who they really love, and the commander's like, hey, maybe you should go see him, try it out, give it a chance. And then normally by that point, I get them hooked because a lot of them have never had a real strength coach. And if they had, they had a bad experience with them. So those kind of 5 or 6 subtopics for building culture that I said really resonates with them. And once again, these guys are basically an elite level fraternity. You're not one of them that lets you in as a contractor. And this could take a year, could take 2 years. But, I think I've made good progress here with the guys. But the first 30 days, I had a ton of other tactical strength and conditioning coaches tell me, you're not one of them. Listen, those first 30, 60 days, just listen to them. Put a workout up on the board. If they want to do it, awesome. If not, cool. Listen, learn, grow, adapt. And I think that those 6 or 7 things that I just mentioned are how I formulated a good culture amongst, almost 40 of the pilots right now. We're hopefully going to see that number increase going forward.
Ryan, you have any questions or comments on that?
Yeah. I mean, I like what you said a lot in terms of like if you get to a tactical setting and you're not one of them, that applies wherever you're going to go. Like if I work with baseball at Nova Southeastern, I didn't play college baseball. I can't throw 95 miles an hour. If I work pro soccer, I have no idea what it's like to be in that position. I don't know what it's like to play 16, 17 NFL games a year and feel like my body was in car crashes over and over and over. So the first thing you need to do is sit down, listen to their concerns, and try to address those concerns. It can't be going back to that ego thing. It can't be, I'm going to come in and we're going to do what I want because I have all the answers. Because you don't know the people that you're working with. You don't know the coaches. You don't know their experiences with past strength coaches. Just like you said, they might have had a terrible experience. So even though they don't know me, I could walk in the door and they're like, hey, screw you, go away. And the only way you get past that is just sitting down and having conversation and being like, look, what is it that you're concerned about? Where is our disconnect? And what do you want from someone in this position that I can provide you? And that might not align with my training philosophies or principles, but at that point, it doesn't really matter because my principles aren't going to be imparted onto these athletes unless they trust me to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think even diving in a step further, let me give like a great example that I've personally had on base probably about a month and a half ago. So we had a small COVID outbreak. Everyone kind of got put on leave. Everyone was still paid and everything. We just want to make sure it never happened again. But, the pilots still have to come into work. Where the contractors, we get quarantined for 10 days, 14 days, whatever it is. And now, because of that, I lose momentum with them. And I was gaining so much momentum. And I said, okay, these hour-long workouts are really going to help you and this and that. But a lot of my guys really, really, really love CrossFit. Cliche tactical example. They love it. They can't get enough of it. And I think it's great because, I got guys who are highly motivated and highly active on like that, 20% of the bell curve. But if they can get the same amount of work in 30 minutes and these guys are booked, scheduled day to day to day, every 30-minute blocks, they only have 30 minutes for this. Well, now they feel like, well, why should I waste an hour doing this when I can get the same thing in 30? So eventually I realized, okay, I had lost a little bit of momentum with the guy. And that's not a bad thing. You're going to go up and down, peaks and valleys based on how stressed they are, whatever it is. But I said, okay, what can I do today or this week to make that difference? The first thing I did with everyone who walked in the door, hey man, can you just take 5 minutes to give me feedback on the program? What are you seeing out of it? So now I'm looking at this example and I'm just like, man, like, okay, they're giving me all this great feedback. Like, okay, you only put one program up for the whole year. Well, that may not align with my goals, like you said. So now I have 3 different styles of programming. And I think, Christian, this could even kind of transition into our next topic with programming. You got to get out of your comfort zone here. So I started blending stuff that I knew from CrossFit that they liked into what I wanted out of it. So a primary example would be like, okay, if we have an upper back circuit, let's say I got scat push-ups, dumbbell shrugs, and chest supported rows, right, with a barbell. There's a lot of great stuff there for the upper back, but they may not want to do 3 sets of 10. They may want to do, 21, 15, 9, the common CrossFit breakdown that you'll see. So now I take what I know, mold it a little bit. I made it into, I think I made it into 30, 20, 10 was one of the ones I did, 50, 40, 20 was another one if I'm looking at higher volume, trying to get a little more hypertrophy. But small stuff like that, and then changing it up week to week. So I'll have, 3 different program tracks I can take right now. The first one is going to be the strength track. It's going to be, APRE mixed with conjugate a little bit, just getting one stimulus after another, getting them bigger and stronger. The second one's going to be work capacity. This is for my guys that need general work capacity because that aerobic base is so important for them flying in the jet. Because when you're absorbing those G's into your body, you're losing blood flow to your head and risk passing out. So if we can increase that capillary density, increase the size of the blood vessel and how much blood you can get back to the head, well, you're going to be a better pilot and be able to sustain under those G's for longer. And I think the last one that we did was called longevity. And that's a combination of both. And it's for my guys that are very like CrossFit heavy. And it lets them have a little bit of both worlds, has the breakdown of reps go in a similar manner, but you don't have to do a barbell lift. You don't even have to do a kettlebell. You could do air squats for all I care if we're talking about the squat. But because of that, we change up the variety week to week. So maybe I'll do the same exercises, but I'll have, okay, we have an AMRAP of how many rounds you can get of this. And the next week, that same circuit, like I said, with the upper back stuff that I mentioned earlier, the shrugs, the scat push-ups, and the barbell rows, so that were chest supported. You could go 50, 30, 10 one week, then do timed the next week. Okay, how many can you get in a minute each one? So even though it may violate your training philosophy and what works really well in the past for you, they resonate with that. And it's still the same thing. We're still getting time under tension. We're still building muscle density and size. We're still building up that aerobic base over time. We're just changing the way it's prescribed. So now they're interested. They want to keep going, and it gets the buy-in down the road. And then even then, do individualized programming for the guys that really want it. If I have a guy that has a jacked up neck and shoulder, well, I need to take that in consideration and help the PTs out with their rehab. So that kind of is the overlooming, programming philosophy, and helps get them buy-in back to the culture. So I even think Christian and Ryan, I think we just nailed 2 birds with 1 stone right there.
Yeah, just took it out. That's a good point you make with altering it to make it almost like a CrossFit form, because I know there's always ways to do that. Like if you're running a conditioning session and your sport coaches are saying that your athletes are resting too much, but you know that they need to be. So then you just throw something in like you said, scat push-ups, just a great filler of time, or band pull parts, something like that. So there's always options of flexibility to make people happy and still get in what you need to get in.
Yeah, and like my younger pilots love the strength stuff. They love having specific lifts tracked over 4 weeks, and then we repeat. And then my older guys who were, the top 1% of pilots love the CrossFit stuff. So I just need time under tension and, work capacity and a little bit of strength. So I just put them on the longevity program, and now everything gets fixed because it's a new way of presenting the same exercises in 2 weeks. And then every 2 weeks I switch it up because they love variety. They can't get enough of it. That's what they're used to. So it still gets what I want. It still gets what the pilots need. And then on top of that, it gets to them what they want as well, and creates that culture. And now, you build that rapport with them. Now they start looking out for you. Now they'll bring 2 other guys in with them. Now your program looks better. So you see the domino effect that slowly, transpires after that.
Absolutely. So do you have any like really high training age guys that come in and you put them on like very specific programs or anything like that?
I have a couple guys. I have one guy who's one of my bosses actually. He got like number 2 in the CrossFit games in the Peninsula area. So like he's a freak athlete, Guy's been training for 6 years, has gotten injured multiple times. His resiliency is through the roof, and he comes back. He does his own thing right now, but he also has me watch him and coach him. He was struggling on the snatch the other day. We took him from the blocks instead. Suddenly, neurologically, that problem's fixed. So I don't necessarily do specifics except unless it's for someone like him who's like, hey, what can I do to modify this? Or can you give me a specific cycle for the snatch that'll modify? Because I don't like this one my original coach gave me outside of here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ryan?
So yeah, going back to what you were saying about possibly having to help like the PTs and stuff. In athletics, you have a team that works with an athlete where it's like strength coach, athletic trainer, sports doc, sport coach, maybe sports psych nutritionist, right? What is that team comprised of in the tactical setting where you are? Like, is it you, the fighter pilot, and like their commander, or how does that look, I guess?
Yeah, so kind of breaking down the squadrons for you, in our first fighter wing, we'll have the commanders of each of the squadrons. So those will be my primary points of contact, and then below them is the director of operations. So these are the people that I talk to, like, hey, I need some more guys from X squadron to come in. Could I come present to you guys and show a little bit about what I'm doing? I'm even doing one of those tomorrow, But then on top of that, from a holistic standpoint, we have athletic trainers. We have PTs that are done through the Air Force. So these are people who serve, and that is like their actual job as an airman, to be the physical therapist for the pilots of the first fighter wing, right? Then we have a massage therapist who looks at it from a different lens, right? And then I have flight docs who know all the physiology and what these guys go through in the air, and then they relay that data. So we have a hierarchy, basically. Myself, the ATs, and the massage therapists are going to be at the bottom of the pyramid, right? Second up in the next layer is going to be the physical therapist. Directly after that is going to be the flight doc at the top of the pyramid. So our goal is to be the first line of defense from a holistic standpoint to keep people from going to the PT and then PT from going to the flight doc. Because then if they get what's called the NIFT, which means duty not involving flying, that is really bad. That means they can't fly the jet. They don't do what they love anymore. And if it comes back like your program was responsible for that, that is not a good look. And these guys talk, like we said. So you have to be very careful with what you do with some of the guys, and understand that there's a million ways to look at one specific scenario. The PT may say one thing, the ATs may disagree and find a way to fix it a little bit quicker. The massage therapist may give you data on, okay, I have scar tissue on this guy's sternocleidomastoid. And you have him take the Hypervolt, or Theragun and just rub it out real quick before the training starts. That way his neck can be remobilized because he's flying later today. So we all tie into each other, give each other data, which I think is the most important thing, because even as a strength coach, I think going back to the first episode that we did, part 1, you need to be able to look through different lenses at everything, man. If you don't, you will fail in this field.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. How often do you guys come together and meet as a team about everything that's going on with the pilots? Is it like daily conversation or what?
Yeah, so normally it's once or twice a week. We'll talk about specifics like, okay, I saw pilot with whatever call sign he has this week, and he flew X amount of times, and here's what I saw with him. Kosta, did you see anything in the weight room with him or her, And I could say, yeah, I noticed during the program he or she felt pain in this area, radiated down, and I reported up to the PT. So yeah, we'll meet about that, very specifics. We'll also meet about programming, like how can we better ourselves? Because right now our contract is in a very weird spot. The ATs can't really do their job. So how do I use these guys to help promote, the licensed massage therapist or our human performance center with me as the strength coach? There's other things that they can be doing to help out as well that require meetings. So I think once or twice a week is normally a pretty good one for people trying to get into the tactical side. Because I'm a fan of a 5-minute meeting. If we don't have anything to say the minimum and get out, or don't have one at all, just shooting the text message. But if we call a meeting, let's have a reason for calling it.
Yeah, sure.
Ryan, do you have anything more on that?
No. I mean, I just was interested on hearing your points because I know, obviously, we know how it works in the college setting, both me and Christian being from that side of things and being a part of that high performance team, for a lack of a better term. But that kind of makes sense. But yeah.
Is there a lot of friction in your setting? Because I know I've dealt with a lot of friction between myself and ATs.
So I'm super blessed in my setting. There is very little to no friction at all. And if there is friction, we just have a quick convo about it. I truly will say this right now. I know I said the word blessed a lot, but I think it's an understatement. We have such a good staff here that works with us on the OHWS contract. And we have great leaders on this base as well that are our points of contact, that are, that top 1% of, Air Force pilots who have vouched for this for years. So I would say no, Christian. I don't think we have any friction right now. And I think that it's only going to get better from here. And I think that's one of the reasons our base is succeeding. But I think a lot of places do have friction. And how you go about that is how you go about that. Just know the people you're talking to, like we said with communication earlier, and try to be able to relate to them. Like I said, if I have 4 different staff members in front of me, I need to be able to talk to all 4 in a very different manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I don't have anything else to talk about in terms of programming, so I'd like to dive into interviewing if you guys are ready for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what is the worst interview you've ever had?
As far as me interviewing someone or them or
No, you as the interviewee, sorry.
Oh God. Man, that's a good one. I think one of the worst ones I ever had was right out of I would say I was in grad school, I was interviewing for my first position with Exos, and it wasn't that it was a bad interview. I just didn't understand the population we were talking to. So this was for one of their general population sites. And I didn't realize they were kind of testing me the whole time. Like, what's your programming philosophy? And I'm talking about barbell movements, athletic performance, and XYZ. And while, I know my stuff, I'm coming off as I'm not going to be a good fit for their audience. Now, mind you, I still had a connection with them, and we talked after, and it was great. But I think I could have done a better job of relating. I think I think one of the worst things I ever did was actually, it was an email, not even an interview. I had actually clicked the wrong template that I sent in to show my programming. It was an incomplete one. So now I come off as someone who doesn't know what they're doing. You know, I think that was definitely the worst part that I had. But I haven't had a ton of truly bad interviews per se.
All right. What about the best you've ever had?
Ooh, I think the best I ever had. That's a good one. I would probably say, yeah, my first position with Exos. Like that was definitely one of the better ones before I moved to Detroit. I initially had a family member get sick, and they were interviewing some other people. You know, you had minor league strength coaches from the Tigers, other big strength and conditioning guys going just to be in this Gen Pop site to just take a break from athletics, the 80, 90-hour work weeks, the stress. And I was a grad assistant that stood out. I didn't say any profanity in the interview. I connected well and resonated with the people. And I just showed that I could do the work. And because I was young, they wanted me to film do a live training session with somebody. And I didn't have a client. I was like, okay, well, how am I going to do this? Hey, Dad, come help me out real quick. So literally my dad took off work. We're in our garage and he's doing med ball slams, you know, plank holds with leg lifts, like whatever you want to call it, right? And I just remember, like, I was coaching him up. I was pointing out everything, why we were doing it. And by the end of that, like, quick 20-minute, you know, brief workout that I did over a Google Hangouts or FaceTime call, whatever it was, they loved it and they had no questions. And I just knew from that point, like, okay, I killed it. You know that feeling when you walk out of a room, you're like, yeah, I definitely did a good job, you know?
Yeah, I get that feeling a lot. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh, I didn't actually kill it.
It goes back to that volume button, right?
Yep. You don't know what you don't know, and that's what happens to me sometimes. So what's the biggest thing you learned from interviews in general?
I think you learn just how to talk and be confident. You know, I think there's a really good interview that I did that I'd say was my second best, where I actually ended it with, you know, we had gone over like all the questions. I'd done a good job answering. And it was like 10 different reasons why I should be hired were kind of brought up. And then the very last question was, okay, well, of all the candidates we have for this position, you know, we're interviewing, you know, 8 to 10 people. Why should we hire you? And I started listing off, like, I went back to those reasons that we had, and I brought them back in. I listed off 2 or 3, and I'd say, guys, look, at the end of the day, you know, the question is not why should you hire me? I could list off the other 8, 9 reasons we've gone over. But the question is, why should you hire me? And no one had ever said that to them in an interview before. I'd come off with that confidence. But it was such a good interview that I knew if I could finish it, it's like a sundae. If you put the cherry on top with the whipped cream, just right, you know? So by having that confidence and having the ability to go in front of someone you've never met, or maybe have only had one call or an email with, and just kill the interview, you learn a lot about yourself and how to portray yourself to people. And knowing how you're being perceived during the interview is huge. If I know that I'm killing it and these guys are loving it and we're laughing, and it becomes not a strict A, B equals C conversation, and it becomes a very personal conversation. Oh, no way, your wife, you know, lived in Michigan for a little bit. Oh, no way, that's crazy. Like, I'm living in Southfield right now. Oh, your wife's from Southfield? Oh, no way. Like, now you're building that personal rapport and connection with them. So by knowing that confidence, seeing that personal rapport and connection being built, like you said, there might be a guy who's the best fit, but he's not personable, doesn't matter.
Yep, that is absolutely correct. So, what was I going to say? Yeah. So what is one question that you would always ask in an interview as the interviewer? And then what's one that you would always ask as the interviewee at the end of the interview?
Ooh, God. Okay. As the interviewer, are we talking just strength and conditioning or like in general?
General's fine. Whatever
Okay.
you got.
What has been the biggest challenge you've had in X field, and what have been your solutions to overcome it? And if the coach is young, I'll ask as a young coach. Like, you can learn from young people during an interview. It's not just for the job. Like, learn about them, learn about their struggles, because those struggles may not be a good fit for this role with the solutions he or she provides. So talk about it, you know? I think at the end, as an interviewee, I ask, if you were in my shoes right now, as someone stepping into this role, what would be something you would do over again? Especially if they've held a position like that. Like if they've been an assistant strength coach under a director, talk about what did you do right, what did you do wrong, and what could you have done better? Because now I'm investing in the other person and I'm showing, hey, I want to learn from you already in the interview. There's an undertone of that, and then you're actually doing it in the interview.
All right, I'm going to do something interesting here. Ryan.
Yeah.
I want you to answer both those questions.
Okay. So the first question where it's what is my biggest challenge I've had to overcome as a young strength and conditioning coach? I would say, like, kind of going back to that whole volume button of ego. When I started my GA position here at Nova, I was so prepared for like my week 1 of my program. Like, this is how we're going to progress through the fall semester. This is what I'm going to test. This is what I think should improve. And I had all of the strength and conditioning details worked out. And I did not think about what happens when people come late. What happens when an athlete doesn't want to do what I want them to do? What happens when the coach doesn't want them doing this? I didn't think about any of that stuff. So I didn't have the right to have an ego about it because I didn't know my own answer. And that was a huge mistake. And I had to figure that out on the fly. Because people would come late and I'd be like, hey, what the heck? And I wouldn't do anything about it. And then it became like a problem with one of my teams where, someone wouldn't be there for a week and I had to figure out what to do. And instead of backtracking and trying to turn my ego up when I didn't have it there to begin with, I asked them to just come talk to me. I shot them a text. I'm like, hey, I'm around. Like, just come in and talk. I haven't seen you in a week. I just want to know what's going on and make sure you're okay. And they came in. They opened up to me about some personal stuff that was going on at home. And I was like, holy cow, thank God I didn't fire off the anger that I had about, like, what is wrong with you? Why are you missing these sessions? I realized, like, okay, yeah, I need to have all this stuff prepared, but, like, I need to also think about the person because all I'm thinking about right now is myself as a strength coach, not these 18-year-olds who are away from home for the first time. They don't know what to do to get back on track in their class, or like their mom is sick and they're not home and they're not used to it. There's just so much going on and I just wasn't prepared for that. And I had to kind of roll with that stuff without ever thinking about it or realizing kind of the position you're in as a coach. And the second question could you just repeat it one more time? I got so into what I was saying.
Oh, yeah. If I was in your position right now, what are some of the mistakes that you made in your career, or what advice would you give me if you were about to take on a position like this?
Okay. So since you're in a position I hope to be in one day, I'm going to treat this like I'm talking to an intern who'd be interviewing to intern with us. Yeah. I would say try to get outside of the weight room or whatever teams you're working with. Like I think I've done 8 internships so far. So like at every internship I was at, if I was with football at Kennesaw State, the only strength coaches I talked to were the football strength coaches. I didn't talk to the football coaches. I was only in the weight room and I didn't learn a goddamn thing from anyone else. So I spent 3 months at a school that had a great Olympic sports staff. None of them even knew my name, and I don't even think they ever saw me, and that's a huge mistake. So I think anytime you get out and you go somewhere that's out of your comfort zone, you're already outside of that comfort zone, so you need to just kind of keep rolling with it and connect with everyone wherever you are. Because if you walk over to the Olympic Sports Building and you introduce yourself, maybe the football afternoons are empty and you can start helping with track and field too. And then all of a sudden you have a connection there and you interview for a GA position that wants you to work with the throwers. And you can say, hey, I help train the throwers here. This is their strength coach. This is the throws coach. If you need any more information, give them a call. And that's something I didn't do. And looking back on it, like I didn't know I'd do 8 internships, but I have. And there's so many people at those schools that I could have connections with that I don't. And that's a huge mistake.
8 internships? I didn't even know you did that.
Yeah, including Nova. Yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah, all through undergrad, man.
It's crazy.
4 years.
Good. That's wild. Thank you for answering those questions, though.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't have a whole lot else for our guest, Ryan. I don't know what you have left.
Yeah, I said the last question I would have is, so you kind of answered like the one, okay, I'm going to look good in the interview question that I'm going to ask at the end. But what are some other questions that you should be asking when you're being interviewed for a potential job that you need to know answers to make sure that that is a right fit for you to go work there?
Sorry, you guys broke up a little bit. Could you repeat that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, aside from the one question you already gave us, what are some other questions that you would ask someone who's interviewing you to make sure that that staff and that organization would be a good fit for you to go work there?
I'd say even learn about even who they are outside of work, right? Like know the people you're talking to, because reality is you need to understand that you're in a room for maybe you're in there 40 hours a week, maybe you're in there 100 hours a week. But I would talk to them about their hobbies. Like, what are your hobbies outside of work? I think, I would tailor it in this manner. Hey guys, I think this interview's gone really well, but I want to know more about the people I'm talking to. What are your hobbies outside of work? What do you do to prevent yourself from having burnout in the field? What's your idea of this for staff bonding? That's a real thing, because I believe that a staff that lives together stays together. A staff that goes out together. And I'm a firm believer that if you can create that culture, you can create a staff that will be happy. So that'll be the first one. And honestly, that's probably really the only one. There's a second one I would ask. What's y'all's philosophy on programming? Because they'll probably ask you about what's your philosophy on programming. You'll give the cliche answer of, do no harm, decrease the risk of injury, and increase performance, right? Like everyone knows that's a standard basic question. If you fail that, you shouldn't be hired. But at the same time, talking about what systems are you running? Do you require me to run one specific system that reflects this whole staff or just the head coach? If we're under Joe Ken when he was with Carolina, we're probably just running the tier system and that's it, because that's his system that he created over a long, long period of time. So is that something I would be comfortable with as a coach coming into that program? So I think these are questions that a lot of people need to ask, and sometimes they don't. Because a unified staff helps. If I take over for you, Ryan, and you're on my staff, do we call a dumbbell row two separate things? Or is it all standardized as a staff? That's something that I like. Like we just got Bridge Athletics on base, and we're changing up some of the exercises now. So everybody knows, okay, this is what a plank is when you do a leg lift attached with it. This is what a single arm bench press is. It's not two in the air, it's one over down here. We're going over what the movement looks like. So that way, if I leave and the AT has to take over, I'm fortunate enough the AT has his USAW, so he can cover for me if I gotta, go to a funeral or something bad happens at home, or if I just want to take vacation, right? So having that ability to be transparent with the staff, figure out who they are, and figure out what they're programming, I think would all play a role. Because if you go into a program and it's programming you don't like, or you're not comfortable with programming, or stuff you don't know how to program, well, then you're going to look like a fool. Maybe you came off confident in the interview, but you're going to look like a fool when you actually start and be like, oh, crap, we just hired the wrong person. We could have hired that other guy that coach knew.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Something I would add is the question I would ask is, what are the relationships like in your department? So within strength conditioning, if you're at a college, and then within other departments as well, because you might have a great strength conditioning department where everybody gets along, and then it might be absolutely toxic between the athletic trainers, the sports psychologists and stuff. And that's so important, because when you get into a place with a great interdepartment culture, you can't be beat. You're going to have great programs all around. But even if you like the head strength coach at somewhere you're applying to, or you like the other assistants that are there, if they don't already have a good relationship with the other departments, then you're going to have a terrible time most likely. And it's pretty easy to pick that out, because if they say right away, oh, they talk about all these examples of why they work together well, but if they have to think about why, because they're going to try to give you a good answer, if they have to think about it, there's probably some issues going on there, and you may want to take that into consideration if you have other options. I know a lot of the time we get offered a job and we have to take it because that's all there is, but that would be the question I would ask as well.
Yeah, and I think even adding on that a step further, like, it goes back to the whole concept of body language that we talked about earlier. If I love my athletic training staff, and you can tell that I do, I'm going to say it confidently. Yes, we have a phenomenal staff here. They feed us data, we give them data back. We have collective meetings to talk about specific stuff that's going on that we can do better on. Well, that sounds like a great culture. Wouldn't you want to be a part of that? So for me, you can pinpoint that. And I think it goes back to that education piece. Learn new skills, man. You might actually save yourself the trouble of taking a job you'll wind up hating down the road.
For sure. All right. Ryan, do you have anything else?
No. I thought this whole conversation was great, and I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, same. Kosta, do you have anything you want to add, or feel free to ask us questions, plug your podcast, anything you want to do? You got as much time as you want.
Yeah, I mean, for any young coaches that are interested in the tactical side of the field or just want to talk it up with me and share ideas, I don't care if you are working with a mom and pop coming in from a corporate American job as a personal trainer or a strength coach with whatever organization, all the way to somebody who's working with, special operations units that are doing 2-mile halo jumps out of planes, the line of battle. Talk to me. If you're in another field, talk to me. I'm always down and open to learning about new things. Because I think a lot of the times as strength coaches, this is a big remark for young coaches, we're so tunnel visioned on just strength and conditioning. Well, what if I branch out and learn something like we talked about earlier? Like, even when I talked to my pilots, kind of summarizing this up, they gave me feedback on stuff that actually really, really helped the success of the program. Because sometimes we're too inside of what's going on to see what's actually what we could be doing better at inside of it. My podcast is called The Proper Millennial. It's basically where I just interview young coaches, people of any profession. It could be a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, could be, like I said, the senior auditor for EY. She rose up through the ranks. Like, let's have a conversation about how you did that. What could I learn from your field I could bring back into mine? It could be something as simple as budgeting. How to budget. I mean, if you guys ever take on a director role or get a chance to work with money one day, that's a skill you may want to learn. And I encourage people to reach out to me. I'm always taking episodes. I think if people want to get in touch with me, I'll send my email out to Ryan and Christian. But my personal one is Telegadas, all one word, 1993 at gmail.com. Instagram is coach_Telegadas. We'll put that in the description for you guys as well. And, just feel free to reach out. Talk to me. I am very open. I like talking to people now that I'm only working 40 hours a week. I have a lot more time to. And I think, Christian and Ryan are doing a great job running this podcast. And last piece of advice for young coaches, don't be scared to swing the bat like we talked about, but also, get a chance. If you have a chance to hop on a podcast, like, connect with somebody. Ryan DM'd me, said, hey, we think you'd be a great fit. Are you interested? Absolutely. I don't care if I'm a 40-year-old coach who's on the verge of maybe taking that next journey into the field to, someone who's young that may just want to come up. Take time and interview, man. The best of the best are always learning. They're always growing. They're always sharing their knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. We really appreciate you coming on, and we will definitely post all your social media stuff, all your podcast stuff, wherever we can to get it out there. So if you're looking to reach out, you can find Kosta through Ryan and I, or anything you just said. So awesome. Ryan, you got closing remarks?
No, like I said, great conversation. Hopefully we get to have you on again, because I'm sure there's many, many, many more rabbit holes we can dive into that we can all learn from. So thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you guys so much, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, man. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and hope to see you next time on the episode or the podcast. All right.